So today we have set up for you the Battle of Fort Donelson. Now this is actually going to be the battle report based on the actual events, not a game that's played. So what we have is the Union forces sieging the Confederate forces. Over here is Fort Donelson with all of its guns facing up the Cumberland River and the river batteries. We have over here Buckner's command that was just sort of holding against the invasion against the fort. And we have Pillow's command, who was getting ready to do the breakout attempt. Even though the Union is the one trying to take the fort, this battle is not them trying to take the fort technically. They're actually laying siege. All along here you can see these are the Union forces holding their positions, basically to starve out the Confederates inside the fort. The men inside the fort realized they couldn't hold it. They could sit there and hold out against the the Navy, which had been attacking them from up there, and they were holding them back, and they were actually holding infantry back as well, so they could hold their position, but eventually they were going to run out of food, so they were going to have to break out. So the plan was, they actually all met the night before inside of the hotel right in there, that white building, and they had this Council of War meeting where the three generals, the one who was in charge, Floyd, and the two subcommanders, Pillow and Buckner, determined that they were going to break out. And so Floyd put under Pillow, who was the second in command, all of these forces gathered around the town of Dover, which is right here. They were screened by these woods right here, so basically the Union command would not see. Grant, who's in charge of the Union, this was his headquarters. It was a widow's home that he had turned into his headquarters. And he basically just had all of his troops here, and he thought that, well, that nothing's going to happen today. So he had gone up this road to go meet with his Navy. So he wasn't on the board quite yet. This is 9:30 a.m. on February 15, the day after Valentine's Day. There's a lot of snow on the ground. It had just snowed a couple days ago, so there was 3 inches of snow on the ground. And starting at 9 a.m., the Confederates were going to make their breakout attempt. Now, Grant had made strict orders with his men to not engage, to not attack. He did not expect to hear any fire coming from this area, because the day before, a lot of his men had gone out and attacked and without his permission, and he had been kind of ticked off, and they hadn't really accomplished anything. So now he was like, no, nobody attack, everybody stay where you are. And they did, but then he heard firing and came running back down thinking his men had done something. This is McClernand's command, by the way. And over here, who do we have here? Actually, I've kind of forgotten. This is Lew Wallace's command, is in the middle here. And then this is Smith's command over here. So after a little while into the battle, you can see over here that the battle has really commenced. The Confederates have pushed out and are knocking some of the Union men back. They're hitting the artillery and really coming out in force over here. Pillow just knocked as hard as he could, sent all of his men out there. McClernand, who's over here, he sent a request over to Wallace and to Smith begging for help, for them to send some people over because a major attack was coming over. But both of them, nobody really trusted McClernand very much. He was kind of a blowhard. So they didn't take him that seriously at first, didn't send any troops. Especially, they were somewhat concerned about what Grant would think, because he had left such strict orders not to start an engagement, not to start fighting. They weren't sure if McClernand had started the fighting or not. And so they wanted word from Grant before they sent him anybody. So this attack was so far being successful. They started hitting him really hard, and were trying to open the door so they could get through this direction. Forrest's men came around his cavalry. He was known as being one of the best commanders, and his cavalry was very good at what they did. So they're coming out this way. So by 9:30 a.m., this is about what it looked like. The advance was still going forward. Nathan Bedford Forrest had dismounted his troops and got in the flank over here of some of the Union men. The brigades of Oglesby and MacArthur were doing the worst. They had gotten hit the hardest over here on the side, and some were fleeing, some were in disorder. They were in really bad shape. And all the Confederates needed to do at this point was really push really hard on the line, and they could really break through. Forrest believed this, and he urged them to go do it. But the others were too cautious, and so they did continue to advance slowly forward, but they didn't go for a general assault at that particular point. And so the Confederate forces slowly moved forward. At this particular point, Wallace finally relented to McClernand's request and sent a brigade over to help. Clearly he didn't quite understand the extent of it, but you can understand when you see where Wallace was versus where all this is happening. All these woods are in the way, and yes, there's firing going on, but he doesn't know if McClernand started it or if it, how big it is quite yet. And Grant still hasn't made it to the field yet to give these other guys permission to do whatever they're going to do. So this is the battle by about 12:30. By this point, W.H.L. Wallace realized that something really was going on, so he started to move his brigades over here to help. McClernand was almost in full retreat. He was barely hanging on. All of his men are, running back. At best, they're reorganizing. MacArthur's men were starting to reorganize over here, but there was a very large horde of Confederates coming at them, which looked very good for the Confederates, but they stalled, and they stopped and slowed down, much to the chagrin of people like Forrest. And even Pillow was a bit horrified, but he didn't really push his men. I'm sorry, even Floyd was a bit horrified. But he really didn't push his men. Pillow was getting cautious, and so was Buckner, and they were arguing a lot over what they should do, and so their men really stalled and kept at the hill where they were and didn't really push forward as much as they could and really exploit the weakness that McClernand was in and finish him off. Wallace hadn't quite engaged yet, but he was on his way. So by 1:30, this is about what it looked like. W.H. Wallace's men had gotten there and were reinforcing McClernand's men and holding the Confederates back. Actually, though, what was really holding the Confederates back was them arguing among themselves, being indecisive, not being quite certain what to do, and it was even looking like they were going to push back. They had the hill well positioned and had a gateway open and still could push to get through here. Even though McClernand was organizing, he still, had the manpower to be able to get through, but they just were, still being indecisive. Grant, meanwhile, had finally come on, had gotten over here. He was actually riding up and down this road, talking with his generals between Smith and Wallace over here. But he sort of determined, well, hey, everything's going on over here, and all of their men over here. That leaves their works lightly defended, and the fort very lightly defended. So he ordered Smith and his brigades to push forward and try to take the works, and even ordered the Navy to start demonstrating up the river to distract the batteries. So this was the field a little bit later, and as you can see, quite a bit actually has happened, particularly on the Union side. Essentially, Grant saw the opportunity, and he said, all has failed on our right, you must take Fort Donelson. He was telling that to Smith, because there wasn't that much in the way of Fort Donelson, which had been their goal from before. So, essentially, Smith started moving his units up. They took the protection of this slight rise here, this hill. They essentially hid down behind that, went prone a whole bunch. And the Confederates up here behind the earthworks started mocking them and making fun of them. A bunch of them are in skirmish, you can see here. We're just mocking them and making fun of them, which wasn't a very good idea because the Union guys kind of outnumbered them and were about to, come and get them. But anyway, they were making fun of them for taking their good old sweet time to come up and get them. Over here, Wallace just completely reinforced over here and, closed the door shut, so now the Confederates couldn't come. And this was the interesting part. The Confederates, no, this is not the beginning of the game. You're not skipping back. The Pillow panicked. General Pillow panicked and pulled his division back. And Floyd, who was supposed to be in command, instead of telling him, hey, get up there, he went along with it and he pulled everybody else back. And so they pulled back behind their entrenchments. Forrest could not believe what was happening. He was saying, no, we should be pushing forward. But he essentially stayed around to guard against an attack and did a rear guard defensive action while everybody pulled back into their entrenchments. And it was supposed to be temporary. They were just going to recover and then come back out and do another attack. But that's basically when things started over there. So this is the state of the battle late in the afternoon, and as you can see, not a lot has changed over here on the right. Basically, Pillow remained hidden behind his entrenchments over here, and Floyd stayed back there with him. Forrest continued to guard and keep open that road in case they were ready to use it. And W.H. Wallace formed up 3 brigades, got ready to advance because of the fact that Grant was doing an advance over here, which they did. They assaulted this wall, got up over the thing, and hit the brigade, sent them back, took the cannons, sent basically all those Confederates who were taunting them running back. Of course, you had the guns from the fort who started firing on them, so they went prone again. But they basically did one thing at a time, taking the outer works. So back over here, Floyd started realizing that his right flank's starting to fold, so instead of continuing his advance out this way, he started sending brigades over here to defend against this. Now the sun was starting to set, so it was kind of getting late in the day. So here's how it looked by nightfall. Essentially, not a lot more happened. Basically, Wallace got his 3 brigades ready for an assault, but realized that, the main assault wasn't going to be happening until the morning, so he held them back. Forrest basically held there, ready to take an attack, while the other entrenchment men waited there. Buckner was starting to pull his men back to defend over here, and was pulling himself back as well to try to rally his men. The Union men over here could have continued forward. So this is what it looks like by nightfall. Essentially the battle ended like this. Wallace was getting his 3 brigades ready to go in as an assault, but it was getting late and dark, and he knew the other side wasn't going to go for its full assault until the morning, so he stopped and waited there. McClernand, meanwhile, rallied his men together. Forrest continued to hold his positions, trying to keep that road open at least, even though they hadn't gotten where they wanted to go. Floyd and Pillow kept their men back behind the trenches. Buckner started pulling his men back to go and guard the fort, and he himself was going over here to rally his men. The Union men over here under Smith had taken the outer fortifications, the outer earthworks, and had gone prone over here, essentially laid down underneath the things to protect themselves against the big guns, because they had determined, we're not going to have the time to fully go after that thing tonight, so we're going to go after them in the morning. Grant was right there, ready to, support them and get them ready, and he basically said, let's wait until the morning. So that was essentially it. The 3 Confederate generals had another council of war in that building right there in the hotel, the Dover Hotel, and determined that there was just no way they were going to be able to make a breakout. Even though they had actually opened the door and could have pushed through there, they had kind of lost their opportunity, and now they were reinforced, and they just didn't see a way to get through, and their men were too demoralized and all that. And they saw that the fort was going to be assaulted in the morning, so they surrendered. However, Forrest, so disgusted that the men had surrendered without really giving a good fight, essentially said, I did not come here to give up my command. So he and his men left, I believe by that road that they're on right there, but it could have been another one. But basically they got out of there, and then the rest of the men surrendered in the morning. On February 16, 1862. The battle had happened on the 15th, and then they surrendered on the 16th. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.